Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Patience. In today's tutorial we are going to be making this beautiful bishop collar tiered gathered dress with a placket and a waist drawstring. So before we get started, kindly click the subscribe button. If you have done that, let's get into it. I will be using this soft crepe fabric and it is 6 yards. So I've gone ahead to fold my fabric good sides this way. To know the amount of fabric to fold is the biggest circumference, quarter of the biggest circumference measurement plus 2 or 3 inches. I've gone ahead to mark the shoulder line, and right on the shoulder line I'll mark half of my shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches, and I'll add ½ inch for sewing allowance, that is 8.5 inches. On the 8.5 inches, I'll come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant, and I'll be using 3 inches for the width of the neck, and for the depth of the neck I'll use 1 inch for the back neck, and I'll use 3 inches for the front neck. Using a curved ruler, I will go ahead and curve the back neckline and the front neckline. After doing that, I'll slant the shoulder from this 1 inch this way. I'll mark my chest line from this 1 inch. So my chest line is 8 inches, that is the armhole line. So I am going to mark from this, like from the shoulder line, so that I can get my accurate measurement. So I'll mark 9 inches. Now I'll bring down this shoulder measurement, that is 8.5 inches, to the chest line, and I'll connect the points. And I will mark the midpoint of this line, which is 4 inches. Right on the 4 inches, I will go in by ½ inch for the back armhole and 3/4 inch for the front armhole, and I'll make a slant line to the tip of the shoulder this way for the front armhole and the back armhole. On the chest line, I'll mark quarter of my bust circumference, which is 10.5 inches, and I'll add 1 inch for ease, that is 11.5 inches, and 1 inch for sewing allowance, that is 12.5 inches. Using an armhole curve, I'll curve the front and the back arm's eye. And I'll mark ½ inch on the shoulder line for sewing allowance. Now I'll mark the shoulder to waist measurement. I'll be using 16 inches. My shoulder to hip measurement is 26 inches. Now the total length of this gown is going to be 60 inches, and I'm going to divide the 60 inches by 2, that is 30 inches. So I'll be using 30 inches on this upper part of the dress, and the remaining 30 inches I am going to divide it into 2 for the first and the second layer of the ruffle. That is 15 inches for the first layer and 15 inches for the second layer of the ruffle for the lower part of the dress. Now I'll mark 30 inches and I'll add ½ inch for sewing allowance, that is 30.5 inches. I am going to be using the hip circumference on the waist because I am going to be attaching a waist drawstring that is going to give the waist its shape. So I'll mark quarter of my hip circumference, that is 11 inches, and I'll be adding extra 1.5 inches for ease and 1 inch for sewing allowance, that is 13.5 inches. I am also going to mark the 13.5 inches here. I'll be using this front piece as a pattern to cut out the back. So I'll cut out the back neckline and the back armhole. I've gone ahead to cut out the back piece. I'm going to keep it aside. And on the front piece, I am going to cut out the front neckline and the front armhole. Now on this front piece, I am going to be making a placket. To do that, I will note the center front, that is the midpoint. So if you can't see yours, you can fold the front piece and mark the folded edge. Before taking my measurements, I ironed the folded edge so I could see the midpoint. So for the placket, I've gone ahead to cut out this strip of fabric. And the length is 14 inches. So I'll be using 13 inches for the placket, but I cut out 14 inches. That is for the length, and the width is 3 inches. And I folded 1/2 inch on both sides and fold the midpoint. So I have 1 inch here. I did the same thing on the other strip. On the right side of the fabric, I am going to mark 13 inches for the length of the placket. So I'll be using 13 inches, and I am going to mark the midpoint this way. The strip is going to be on the center front, that is on this line. So I'll mark the edge this way. That is 1/2 inch on both sides. So I'll mark the same 1/2 inch on both sides on the upper part, and I'll connect it this way. To attach the strip, I'll make sure the opened edge is facing the right side and this other opened edge is facing the left side. Now I am going to place the left side this way. I'll make sure it is on the line, and I'll place the right side on top this way. That way the opened edges are facing opposite direction, if that makes sense. Now I'll flip it this way and place the edge at 12.5 inches. So I'll mark 1/2 inch above the 13 inches. So the edge is at 12.5 inches, and I am going to mark the 13 inches. So I'll be sewing on this 13 inches. I'll go and sew on the 13 inches. So on the placket, I am sewing on 1/2 inch. I've done that. I will cut through the center front this way. And I'll end it with a V shape. So from 12.5 inches, I am going to mark like a V shape this way, and I'll cut through. I'll bring out the extra fabric from the wrong side this way, and I'll make sure it is flat. I'll take out the right, and on the left I am going to put the fabric in between the placket this way. I will make sure the folded edge is on the marked line, and I will pin it down. After doing that, I'll make a top stitch and I'll do the same thing on the right side. I've done that and it came out really neat and beautiful. So I'll cut out the excess on the placket. On the wrong side, I am going to cut out the extra fabric this way. After doing that, I am going to hem this part. So that is it for the placket. Now I'll be joining the front and the back piece. I'll place good sides this way and sew on the 1/2 inch for shoulder allowance and also on the 1 inch for side seam. I've done that. Join the shoulder and the side seam. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be cutting out the bishop collar. So I'll measure the round neck. The round neck is 24 inches. So I'll be cutting out the bishop collar using this pattern paper. So I folded my pattern paper this way, as you can see, and these parts are equal. Now I am going to mark half of the round neck, which is 12 inches. From the 12 inches, I'll mark 3 inches up this way. And then I am going to mark half of this 12 inches, that is 6 inches. After doing that, I'll make a curve from this 6 inches to this 3 inches this way. Now I'll mark the 12 inches on this curved line. And I'll mark the length of the collar, which is 1.5 inches. So I'll be using 1.5 inches. You can use 1 inch if you like. I'll connect the points. And I'll make a curve this way. So this is the bishop collar. So if you notice, I didn't add a sewing allowance because I'm going to be cutting it out on a collar stay, and I'll be using the exact measurement. So if you're not cutting it out on a collar stay, you can add 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch for sewing allowance. So I've gone ahead to cut it and iron it on the fabric, and I added 1/4 inch for sewing allowance. Now I am going to place another fabric this way. I also ironed an interfacing, so I'll place good sides this way, and I'm going to fold the edge this way. Starting from the folded edge, I am going to sew all through, and when I get here, I'll also fold this part. I've done that, as you can see. Now I am going to cut out the excess. And I will notch this side I stitched, and I'll bring it inside out and iron it. I've done that, and now I am going to attach it to the dress. Starting from the wrong side, I am going to place the unfolded edge of the collar and I'll pin it round. Make sure to notch the midpoint on the collar stand and the neck and align the notched area before you pin it down. So I'm going to sew by 1/4 inch round. I've done that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'll push in the raw edges this way. And I am going to fold the other edge by 1/2 inch and I'll make a top stitch. And I'll top stitch round. I have done that, and this is how beautiful it came out. So that is it for the bishop collar. Now I am going to be cutting out the ruffle on the lower part of the dress, and I am going to measure the hem. And what I have here is 25 inches times 2 is 50 inches. So you can times the 50 inches by 2.5 or 3 inches. It depends on how full you want it. And I cut out 50 times 2.5 inches. And like I said, the first layer is going to be 15 inches and the second layer is going to be 15 inches. So I cut out 16 inches here. I'll be using 1/2 inch to join the upper part of the dress and the lower part of the dress. Now I am going to use the longest stitch on my sewing machine to sew on 1/2 inch all through, and I'll gather it. And when I gather it, I will make sure it is up to 50 inches and I'll leave 1/2 inch on both sides for joining allowance. Before I do that, I'll be making a casing for the waist drawstring. So I've gone ahead to mark 16 inches from my shoulder to waist, round the waist. So I've gone ahead to cut out the casing, and I cut out 2.5 inches and I folded 1/2 inch on both sides. So I am left with 1.5 inches. So from the midpoint, that's the center front, I am going to fold the edge of the casing this way, and I'll place it on 1/2 inch from the midpoint. I'll make sure the midpoint of the casing is on the line, and I'm going to pass it all through, and I'll cut out the excess, and I'll also fold the edge on 1/2 inch from the center front. And I'll make a top stitch on both sides of the casing to secure it. I've done that. Starting from the folded edge, I top stitched on both sides of the casing all through, as you can see, and I am going to pass my string all through. I've gone ahead to cut out the second layer of the ruffle, and I added extra 1 inch for hemming allowance, and I've hemmed the lower part already, as you can see. And what I have is 15.5 inches. So I'll be using 1/2 inch on the top for joining allowance. So I've gone ahead to use the longest stitch on my sewing machine to sew on 1/2 inch all through, and I'm just going to pull one of the threads and gather it this way. So I cut out times 2 of 125 inches, that is for the first layer, and I am going to leave 1/2 inch on both sides for joining allowance. I've gathered the first layer, and like I said, I left 1/2 inch on both sides for sewing allowance. I've joined the 1/2 inch, and this is how it came out. I ensure to stitch on the gathers to keep it in place. Now I am going to attach it to the dress. So I am going to place the right side this way, and then I will sew round by 1/2 inch. I have also gathered the second layer, as you can see, and I have also joined the side seam, and I made sure to stitch on the gathers to keep it in place. So I've joined the first layer. Now I am going to attach the second layer. So I'll place good sides this way. And I'll sew by 1/2 inch round. I have done that and it came out really full and beautiful. The next thing I'm going to do is to cut out the sleeve. I've gone ahead to cut it out, and I have also joined the side seam. I have a detailed video on how to draft a basic sleeve. I'll put the link on the description box below. I've also gone ahead to cut out the band of the sleeve, and on fold it is 3 inches. I ironed an interfacing. So my sleeve length is going to be 24 inches. So I minus the band from the sleeve. And my wrist round is 9 inches, so this is 4.5 inches. And I cut out the band 10 inches because I'll be using 1/2 inch to join the band. So I'm going to join it by 1/2 inch this way. I've done that. So after sewing on 1/2 inch, I trimmed it out a notch for it to come out flat. So I have ironed it, and I'm going to attach it to the sleeve. You can use any side of the cuff as the right side. So I'm going to place the right sides this way, and I'll make sure I aligned the stitched area. And I will sew round by 1/2 inch. I'll do the same thing on the other sleeve. I've done that. I've attached the cuff. The next thing I'm going to do is to attach it to the dress. I've done that. I've attached the sleeve. I made sure the front and the back armhole are aligned, and this is how beautiful it came out. Now I'll be cutting out the string for the casing. I've gone ahead to cut it out. The length is my waist circumference times 2, and the width is 2 inches. So I folded 1/2 inch on both sides and fold it again. If you want it really tiny, you can go ahead and fold it again. So I'll be folding the edge by 1/2 inch this way and fold both sides back and top stitch. I've done that, and now I am going to be passing it through the casing. Using a safety pin, I am going to pin it up this way and pass it through the casing. And that is it. The string is going to give the waist its shape. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to make the buttonhole and attach the button. So I'm going to divide, I want my button to be 5, so I'm going to divide the 13 inches by 5. So I made it 2.6 inches space. So this is how really beautiful it came out. As you can see, we have come to the end of this tutorials, guys. If this was helpful, kindly give this video a thumbs up and also click on the subscribe button, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to be updated when I upload a new video. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.